think I have it now.
There you are.
There I am.
It
Sorry,
is
I
so
was
nice to
just
meet
switched
you.
back up. It's so lovely to meet you too, Mark. It's really nice to meet you too. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. How about yourself?
Good. I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
Good.
Yeah, just a typical busy day, working away. So it's nice to unwind. And then I was like, oh, I better start getting ready for for
Good.
tonight.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really, really nice to connect with you. And thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's such a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm looking forward to having a fun conversation and helping cross pollinate. I I I love being on Instagram and meeting so many writers like yourself, or just people of all walks of life. But there's
Yeah,
so many indie artists and people just following their passions, and I really
um,
love that. You know.
me
Um,
too. It's been incredible for me because I haven't been on Instagram that long, and I think as a writer, sometimes it can be a bit isolating, and you wonder are other people going through um, like if you're having a bit of writer's block or you want to chat about things that maybe your friends aren't into writing and stuff like that, it can feel a little isolating. So it's been really nice to branch out and meet all, you different guys, and everybody's been so welcoming as well. And it's a supportive community. So I found it extremely helpful and encouraging as well. So it's been really good for me. I've enjoyed it. And it's my first venture into social media. I've never done social media before, ever.
hmm.
I'm a dinosaur.
It can be daunting, you know. It really can be, and there are
Very daunting.
a lot of asshats out there. But fortunately,
There are,
I've not
yeah.
met too many on either platform. I've not run into too many people who are idiots. So it's kind of nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
That's
good.
what put me off for so long, I think, to be quite honest. Just like all especially being like a mystery crime writer, it terrifies the life out of me.
That's wonderful. I why does it terrify you?
Just because, there is so many, all these horror stories about people online and things that
Oh,
happen and stuff like that,
sure.
it really put me off.
Yeah.
Um, Especially, being female as well. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think you get into that. I remember the first time putting a picture of myself out there, and I was just so nervous because you're just so scared of how it's going to come across. But it
Right.
was
You're
just
waiting for all the marriage
something that,
proposals to come in. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
How
there
many
was a few,
proposals am
there
I
was a
gonna
few stages.
yeah, my husband's gonna say, take this down. You can only get married
I
once.
know.
That's to me. That's great.
But yeah, so it was definitely it was an unusual time, but it's definitely been good so far. Fingers crossed.
That's good. That's good. Okay. Well, I'll do my I don't have a cheesy intro like we do for my heavy metal horror podcast, but I can say, hey, this is Mark Justice, and you're back to Between the Lines. And today's show is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk to writer Nic Winter. Nic, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. It is a really fun to get to meet you because we've like known each other on Instagram for a few months and chatted quite frequently, but this is the first time we've actually had to talk in real time. So it's nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's,
Just for our listeners out there, Nic is from Scotland, in case you weren't getting the lovely accent. So, yeah, what part of Scotland are you from?
so I'm from Glasgow originally, Mark. Yeah, born and raised in Glasgow, so I'm a Glaswegian through and through. And I still work in Glasgow, and I live just outside Glasgow now. So the accent's very broad. I do apologise to everyone.
Oh, no, no, it's good because I know Glasgow is different than other parts of Scotland. So
Yeah.
I have friends from Scotland, and what they're always talking about the Glasgow accent being different. So
Mhm.
just like different parts of America, you're going to find accents all over the place,
Yeah.
which is kind of fascinating. And
It is. I think probably the Glaswegian accent might be the most common, well-known one, because it's quite harsh. So
Mhm.
I'm always quite, when I speak to people from around the world, particularly on Instagram, I get quite nervous because I'm like, oh, I hope they can understand one word that I'm saying.
Oh yeah, I can understand perfectly. No,
Oh, thank you.
it's delightful. So um, yeah, we had when I was a senior in high school, we had an exchange student from Finland stay at our house,
Mhm.
and I remember like taking her out to see friends and people at the church I was going to at the time, and there were people coming up to her speaking really slowly, like, "Can you speak English?" And not knowing that this you know lovely girl could speak five
I,
languages fluently, you know, and and just the kind of sheer lack of knowledge about Finland, and they're asking her like if she could yodel and things like that. It was
oh
just
my goodness.
really embarrassing. Um, so yeah,
Oh, I know. I get that too. Like, do you play the bagpipe? Yeah, I often sit at night playing bagpipes.
right, and that's fantastic.
And we're Celts.
Yeah, well, there is some on my dad's side, we might have some Scottish, some Irish by way of Norway. When the Norwegian
Oh,
Vikings,
okay.
when the Vikings came over and inhabited parts of Scotland and parts of Ireland,
Hmm.
that's where I have a lot of recessive genes, broad and tall, blue eyes, blonde hair, all those
Yeah,
recessive Nordic,
Nordic
Iceland, yeah,
gene.
features.
Hmm.
Because then my mom's side is Welsh, so they're tiny
Oh, okay.
mining people who like to sing, and then my dad's side are these Viking people, so I inherited all of those genes. you know
Well, that's a good collection. My mom was actually born in France, so she was French originally, um, and my dad's Scottish. So I'm a bit of a hybrid, but
okay.
I've never lived anywhere else other than in Glasgow. So I've travelled about Europe. I've never been to the US though. I'd love to see the US and Canada, but I've
Can
never been outside of Europe.
Sorry,
Am I
Canada's a
allowed to
nicer
say Canada?
version. Canada's a nicer version of the US. It's
It
cleaner,
looks
the people
beautiful.
are more pleasant, so they know how to take care of things. So
It does look beautiful.
yeah. Well, I'm in Ohio, about a half hour west of Cleveland. So
Okay.
right a couple hours or a couple miles south of Lake Erie. So I
Oh
always
wow.
grew up around the lake. I grew up in a town called Vermilion, which Juniper is based on, and it was right on the lake. So I love being close to the water and to the lake.
Yeah.
And we have that very round Midwest Ohio accent, which is the most common accent you hear on American news television broadcasting. So because it's
Oh,
kind of neutral, it's a neutral kind
oh,
of
it's
accent.
really nice. It's a lovely accent you have.
Oh, thank you. And see, this is only twice now I've ever heard that from someone who was commenting on my accent. The other time is when I
Oh.
was with my grandma visiting her, and she lived in Greenville, South Carolina. And
Hmm.
so we were out at the store getting groceries. And so the girl who was waiting on us said, "Oh, you're a Yankee, ain't you? You're from Ohio." I'm like, "How did you know?" She goes, "Get your accent." I'm like, "What accent?" So that's good. Oh, that's good. Well, Nic, I'm looking forward to finding out all kinds of great things about you, and I want to start with kind of like some broad questions here.
Hmm.
Let's talk about who were some of your favorite writers growing up.
Oh, I would say my very first adult book, if you will. I think I was possibly about 10. My mum gave me an Agatha Christie book to read. So she was my very first venture into adult mystery books, Mark. Um, so I started off with Death in an Isle, and that was me completely hooked on the mystery genre. So I just went on to read basically her whole collection of
Hmm.
books. And I then graduated onto, I was really into horror movies, being a kid of the 80s and 90s,
Yeah.
you know, like you weren't breathing unless you were watching Friday the 13th for Halloween.
Nice.
So I
I,
know
no, that's
my mum
great.
would have been horrified, but I was, that was just part of, I think, my generation, the slasher movie.
Yes.
So I kind of ventured then into, I read a lot of Stephen King
Hmm.
and stuff, and obviously watched lots of Stephen King movies. So I was quite heavily into horror for a while, and then I gravitated towards it. I remember picking up Thomas Harris' book, Red Dragon, and I was completely hooked on that. And then I read Silence of the Lambs. We before I saw the film, um, and that completely hooked me onto the kind of psychology element of mystery. And I think it was one of the first books also that possibly ventured into forensics and stuff that was going on in Quantico, which I found fascinating. So that took me off back into the kind of mystery and psychology genre, I think, or psychological thriller. Um, and obviously, going through school, I read all the classics too. So everything from Jane Austen to Daphne du Maurier and all of these books, which I loved. But the mystery and psychological thriller were always my favourite genre. And it's just where I found that I gravitated towards. And then I think when I was 16, I picked up a book that really kind of blew me away. And it was a book by the true crime author Anne Rule. Um, and it was her first ever book that she'd written, called A Stranger Beside Me. And that was based on her. It was her first ever book, and she was writing about who they didn't know, the serial killer that was stalking the Pacific Northwest at the time, who we later knew as Ted Bundy. Um, but it turned out that while she was writing the book, she was working with Ted Bundy at Hotline, and she knew him very well, and she kind of considered him a friend. And that it really kind of blew me away, because I thought, here's a really smart woman. She's writing this book, and she's telling this guy she's writing this book, who's like her friend at work, and he's the guy she's writing about. So,
It's terrifying.
I
Just the
thought,
thought of that. I'm trying to be in that moment. Like
yeah,
when she realizes that he realizes, you know, that had to
you,
be just ice cold terror running through you.
I can't, I can't. And I remember, because I read the foreword of it, and it was her talking about her emotions when she, obviously, when they arrested him, and I couldn't put the book down. And so that stuck with me quite a lot. I went on to read the rest of her books, her true crime books, and they were so wonderfully researched, and she did an immense job with all of her books, um, that I became quite interested then in true crime. And I don't like to call it a genre, because I think that gives it an entertainment value, when it is horrendous stories that happen to real people. Um, but the psychology behind that really interests me, that how well do you really know someone that you think you do, you know? Um, and so when I kind of paired that with the mystery and the psychological thriller, I think I knew where, if I was ever going to write, that's where my genre would be. So they were my very early ventures into reading. So I'd always say Agatha Christie first, and Thomas Harris, Stephen King. I did love his books, and Rule for sure. And there's a lot of modern writers that I enjoy, like Patricia Cornwell and Lindy Walker and people like that. So there's just so many authors out there. My TBR list is absolutely huge. There's just not enough hours in the day.
Yes. Yes, that is the true shame. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes
I
I wish there were
know.
like a button, like just hold a book to my head, and in like
I
10 seconds I just absorb it, but not.
just download
Yeah,
it.
but also experience the fact that I've read it. I don't want to just have the knowledge of
Yeah.
what happens. I want to have that experience of reading. Yeah, no, I totally get that. Well, we have a kind of a, a common background in some ways. I mean, I love horror
Mhm.
films, and the horror films or the horror that you mentioned really kind of started, I think, Psycho was one of those first horror movies that
Oh,
talk
it's
about
one of my favorite
the
films.
monster
I love
within.
Psycho.
Yeah, and into
Hmm.
suspense and because
Hmm.
it's other than the scene in the shower, it's bloodless, you know, and
Absolutely. And the interesting thing about Psycho, I found was if you take it in context that it was made in, was it 1960 it was released,
mhm,
Mark, I think,
62, I think
662, that it
60.
had to be one of the first movies that even touched on the psychology of mother issues and,
Hmm.
all these dark elements that obviously go on in real life. And that had never really been done before. So I found Psycho such an interesting film from that concept. And Anthony Perkins was, I mean, was
Oh,
just
he's brilliant.
outstanding as Norman Bates.
Yeah,
He was wonderful, truly chilling. Just when you see his jaw moving and
yeah.
like so
The
scary.
little things, those, yes,
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
nuances of his performance and that nervousness.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, it was wonderful. But yeah, it's one of my favorite films. Actually, Psycho still is.
Oh, I thought you broke it. Yes. Oh, it's a brilliant film. Um, Now, trivia question, bonus point for you. Do you know who the real serial killer that Psycho was based on?
um,
He's an American
I'm
serial
going to
killer.
say,
Thank you, America.
yeah,
Came from
is that
Wisconsin.
Ed Gein?
Yes, bonus point for Nick. Good job. There you go. And that
Thank
also
you.
spawned other horror films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Texas,
Yes,
absolutely,
as
yeah,
well as
mhm,
James Gumb and Silence of the Lambs.
absolutely, yeah,
Right,
yeah. Ed Gein's got a lot to.
right. Oh,
Yeah,
wait, is she a great big fat person? Precious. Yes, yes. What a riveting performance by Ted Levine to that performance
yeah.
I've reached out to Mr. Levine to ask him to be on my other podcast, and I haven't heard back yet. I would really love to talk with him.
I loved Ted Levine because he was. I remember I loved him in Monk. I think he was
Hmm.
in Monk for a long time, the detective show,
Yes.
wasn't he? Yeah, I
Yeah.
loved Ted Levine. I wish you could get him on. How cool would
Oh,
that be?
I would love that because I want him to do a bumper as James Gumb. You know, this is James Gumb, and you're watching Heavy Metal Horror. You know,
I know.
I want to, I want that so bad.
That'd
You
be so
know,
good.
that would be awesome. Like, it'd be terrifying to have that. Wait, is this a podcast about killing? You know, um, right? Yes. So,
Oh,
Mr.
it's so
Levine,
good.
if you hear this, please contact me. I want to be on your show, or you want you to be on my show. Um, well, that's awesome. Yeah, but I also, my mom was a big mystery reader, and so she read Agatha Christie, and that was like my first really foray into mystery reading. I grew up reading like classic sci-fi and horror, you know, Frankenstein,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
a lot
Oh,
of H.G.
absolutely.
Wells, a lot of Jules Verne,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and so when I got into reading Agatha Christie, it was like a whole different thing. And I was pretty young. I was like 12. So there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things I know. I wasn't really ready to get, and I found her writing to be charming, but also I was trying to figure out the clues and just, you know, didn't pick up on a lot of that. But
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, and then, you know, she's also the grand dame of cozy mystery. I mean, she kind of started this whole genre of like
She is.
what we
She
call now the
absolutely did.
cozy mystery.
The cozy mystery.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting with Agatha Christie, I was talking to a writer the other day, and I was saying that if you strip back a lot of Christie's books, I think what people forget also is that there's a lot of dark elements in Christie's books. Um, she touches on it because I think, taken in context, that they were written in obviously the early ones in the 1920s. She talks about some really big issues that weren't really discussed in society then. You have rape, incest, sexual assault, um, people with mother issues and father issues that, wasn't really, I guess, things that polite people spoke about in polite conversation.
Right.
So, she does have some dark threads through her writing, but it's all kind of got this very lovely veneer round about it with, the characters
Hmm.
of Marple and Poirot and these really lovely settings.
Right.
Um, But yeah, she certainly did create this whole new, which I love a good cozy mystery. I'm a huge
Yeah.
cozy mystery fan. And but
It
yeah,
is an odd.
she
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's
I spoke over you. Forgive me.
I know, I was just going to say I agree. It was an odd this kind of charming backdrops, but sometimes with a lot of dark elements running through them.
That's what I was going to say. Great minds. Yeah, it's a juxtaposition of this
Yeah,
horrific things hanging in a cute little town. Things happening.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's bake some cookies and solve a murder. And my cat's going to help me solve the beheadings of these people. And um, so yes, that's funny. And I had never even heard of the term before I started writing. So I had to know what it was. Like, well, if I'm going to tell the story, I had to know the genre expectations, because
Mhm.
my usual stuff is like horror, sci-fi, comedy, and so it was interesting to kind of learn a genre and then approach it from an outsider's point of view, and without really reading too much into it, and I'm just amazed and glad that it's such a big genre. It's kind of neat.
It's huge, and I was so desperate to ask you how, from your background of sci-fi and horror, how you approach cozy mystery. I find that fascinating. Um, so that's
Well,
a question I must ask you at some point,
okay.
Mark.
Well, we can talk now. Um, I love genre of all
Mhm.
kinds, and I have a master's in popular culture, which studies genre
Oh,
and formula
fabulous.
as a tropes and those kinds of things.
Mhm.
So as a writer, I was intrigued because I'd never written in that genre, and I wanted to see could I do it. But there
Mhm.
was also a part of me that I was trying. I had a story I wanted to tell, and it was all very new, like for me, like focusing on people's inner dialogue and emotions and relationships and those kinds of things that you don't often get in horror. At least the kind of horror
No,
that I wrote, or my movies, which are kind of comedies, it wasn't about relationships. It's about the joke that keeps on going.
sure.
But um it's kind of dovetailing into what I wanted to talk with you about next. Is it for me? Once I got the parameters of the genre and I did a little bit of research, um, that I had to envision. I know I needed a cute little town, and I'd basically just based it on the town I grew up in, because I knew
Mhm.
the town well. I have a lot of good memories from it, and it's right on the lake, Lake Erie, which I always loved growing up on being so close to the water. And then it's just a small community, so you have a nice group of people, slices of life of everybody. It's like the world in a
Mhm.
small space. You have the nice people, you have the pretentious people, you have the people who are wealthy, the people who aren't, and instigators.
Mhm.
And small town kind of generate this sense of incestuousness. Like, it's a good
Yeah.
thing, it can be great to have the small town camaraderie, but then it gets incestuous and it gets weird and
Mhm.
bad, and then these little tiny
Mhm.
micro rivalries show up, and it's like, in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing, but within the town it's very important politics.
Very important.
Right,
I
right.
love that.
And that's so I kind of I imagined, and I, having grown up in a small town, well aware of these kinds of dynamics, and it was just kind of natural for me to kind of create characters based on events or people or hybrids of people who I knew.
Mhm.
um and then I just started by like listing, okay, in this idyllic town, I know I need certain things being done. Like, there's got to be a post office, and there has to be a bakery
Mhm.
or a diner. And once I had all the places, then I had to put people in them. And that was
Mhm.
really fun, coming up with the characters like, okay, who runs this diner? What's their story? And who works at the post office and who does
I
this?
love that.
Yeah. And so then I began, and then that was when it started becoming real for me. Like, okay, now I'm getting a sense of the place because I know what it looked like because
Of
I mirrored it
course.
after my town. So in book 4, you're going to get a whole map of where everything is. But even the places mentioned in the book, geographically, they're kind of where they are in real life. So the downtown where Abby lives, this little apartment on the second floor above this building, that's a real square. It's a real intersection of Main Street, and Erie. Um,
Oh,
and
I love
you might,
that. That's
yeah,
so interesting.
yeah. And there's a
Mhm.
there's a drugstore right across the street where as I was a kid, I went and got phosphates because that's a place where my mom got phosphates when she was a kid. So there's this. I kind of wanted a place where time stood still.
Still,
It
yeah,
didn't
I
pay
understand.
attention to, and to, it's like,
Hmm.
that's why I wanted the 70s gas station, with the hose that dings when the cars pull up, and
I
the
love that. Yeah.
I wanted those kinds of details that when they all kind of add up, because at
Hmm.
first, my wife, who was reading this, she's like, "Are you sure you want to put this in here?" I'm like, "Yes, yeah, I do." But then she kind of got it. This is a place where time kind of doesn't matter,
Yeah,
and you have this kind of old and new. But I kind of love that sense of the anachronistic is still relevant, you know,
absolutely.
and
Hmm.
so there's this cute little idyllic town, and coming up with characters, and then I don't know. So that's how I built my world, and we'll talk about characters as the next thing. But how about you and your writing? How did you approach building your world?
So it's funny. A lot of what you were saying there kind of strikes me too, Mark. My town is a place called Cedarwood. It's a fictional Scottish town, but it's made up with many different places that I have been in Scotland. So I grew up not in a small town. I grew up in Glasgow in a kind of urban area, and so I didn't want that for my book. I wanted exactly almost everything that you have just said. That I wanted this small village where everyone is in everyone's business, and how much money you earn is important, which it isn't, but it is in this town. Um, what your family's breeding is important. And again, it's kind of highlighting a little bit of the class struggle that goes on in Scotland and the UK. And so that was my idea when I created Cedarwood. And the main character is completely different from a lot of the people that is in this town. So just exactly what you said, there's the really lovely people, um, and there's the pretentious, narcissistic people. Um, there's the professional people. There's the stay-at-home mums. So it's a whole, you know, collection of people that you do come across in real life every day. So that was important. So that's how I approached Cedarwood. I could see it in my head, and so you've got the church and the lovely houses and the little school. So it was all there. It was quite easy for me to put down on paper, because I thought it's maybe somewhere that I would love to have grown up, but I didn't. So maybe it was there for years. I'm not sure, but uh, I enjoyed writing it. I enjoyed creating it in my head, and it was just kind of cherry picked from all different places that I visited for the weekend or whatever in Scotland. There's a lot of places like Cedarwood, but it was nice to start to, as you say exactly, to start to fill it then with people, um, because it's people that make the town, right? So
Right.
so
Exactly.
that was so much fun.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think getting the backdrop was uh, important, um, for Darcy as my main character. It was important for her story to be told, which I'll get into later. So there was a reason that I made it a slightly affluent community, different from where I grew up, but it was important to the story that I wanted to tell. Um, and I'm hoping to continue to build on that because it is a series. So it's not just like a standalone mystery. Darcy's back in book 2 that I'm writing just now, but it's a different mystery in each book. But it is a series.
That's exciting. The series, because you have to tell however long the series is going to be, and I guess for many writers, when they have a series, if it becomes successful, there's no reason to kind of stop it. They keep it going.
Yeah.
I knew from the get-go when I made mine it was going to be 4 books, because I never planned on writing the cozy,
Oh,
but I
that's
thought,
fantastic.
since we're doing one for each season, I thought that's nice, because then you also have a
That's
lot of
exactly what
very
I'm doing.
get out and stop it. um yeah, so that's my new book. The first one was the winter book, and now the spring one. is coming out, and so it's
That's
easy to
so
kind of
funny.
carry all of those
Hmm.
emotions and all the symbolism with the seasons. You can't ignore it, you know. I,
I can't believe that, Mark. That is so bizarre.
right? I know. Maybe we have a common ancestor somewhere.
I
I
think.
don't know. Um,
Oh my goodness,
that's funny. So,
it
so
really is.
what aspect of your world do you like the most? The world that you have created for your series. What is it? If there's one thing that you like the most, what is it?
Um, I think for me, it's the characters, uh, Mark, that I filled the town with. Um, do you mean the town itself or
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I mean,
the
I want to talk
town?
about characters. That's actually next on my list. But if that's what your favorite aspect is,
No,
that's totally
I
fine.
well, I love the town because it's. I think in my head when I created it, it was somewhere that I would love to have grown up. Possibly, I think subconsciously, perhaps that's maybe where it is. But obviously, it was very different from my background. But it's a beautiful village, and it sits right on a loch. It's very picturesque. There's, as I say, there's the local church and the little school, and everything is just tidy and neat as it should be, and it's beautiful. So, but possibly there was maybe a part of us, but what was important to me, it has this picturesque, lovely feel to it. But if you scratch the surface of it a little, perhaps the people living in it aren't quite as perfect
Yeah,
as one might think they are.
I love that. We're not going full blown H.P. Lovecraft where there's like you know cannibalism and like fish cults. We're not going like full
No,
on the horrors of
no,
Dunlop
but
or anything
that's a
like
good
that.
idea. That might be book 5.
Yeah, I mean, why not? You know, like
Cannibalism.
throw a wrench in the works. Yeah, because here's been my long time plan. Even after I don't even know if I was even done with maybe I was done with the first book, but I knew it was going to be done with the 4 book series. And I wanted to also do a 5th book, not a cozy mystery. What I wanted to
Hmm.
do was something that I had never seen. I want to take the town of Juniper, the setting, all the characters, and I'm doing a horror story with
Oh,
those
I
same
love that.
characters. So, and it's it's going to be brutal. I mean, it is. I've already written the death of like a dozen characters, and some of it I wrote the ending. I've already written the ending of the book. Like I was at a book show and like nothing, and I just was like possessed and like, oh, I got it. Oh, this is such a great idea. And I was like, I felt it in my gut, like, oh God, like have you seen
That's
the
amazing.
I was like, I'm like, if I'm feeling this, I really hope that the people who read this are going to either be like really angry, like, my God, you killed everybody, or they're going to say, wow, this is not what I expected. Or, I want to be some kind of something like they're going to have to know this is not a cozy mystery. I mean, I'm going to kill the whole fucking town. But, you know,
I love it.
so,
But
um,
that must be very liberating as a writer, because it's funny, Mark, that I've been speaking to a lot of horror writers recently. Obviously, you're having Stuart on, and getting back into when I read Stuart's 2 books. It was the first time I'd read horror in ages. I still watch horror movies every weekend, but I hadn't read a horror book in a while,
mhm.
and I just loved getting back into the genre again. Um, and I thought, I'd love to go a little darker myself. Get some wheels turning. It's like,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
So I think your book sounds. I think that's incredible. I love the idea. Love it.
Well, thank you. I'm excited. And as a writer, I'm really
Mhm.
excited because it's going to stretch me and my abilities. And I'm already working on this kind of meta planning thing because it's the stories told in kind of layers as things progress. And instead of
Okay.
Abby as the main character, because she's the main character in my cozy, everything is
Mhm.
going to be told from the point of view, or more of an omniscient narrator, but more from Ray. Ray Acavito, the police officer.
Okay.
It's going to be from his point of view. So I think
Okay.
that's really important, from what from for the change in story. That'll make sense when you read it. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I gotta plot it out, and I've told a handful of people, and now everybody knows. And the people who like my books, the ones who've read everything are excited, but the ones who really like the cozy are some of them are very angry at me. Like, how dare you kill these people off? I go,
How
because it's
how
not part of the
could
cozy.
you?
You don't have to read this,
That's
you know?
that's sacrilege to a cozy.
Yes, it's like the antithesis of cozy. It's gonna
Oh,
be a kill. We're gonna be a killsy. It's like, no, you got your
I
four
love.
book series, and now we're gonna kill everybody. You know,
I mean, I think that's fantastic. I'm in. I can't wait to read it.
I can't wait to write it. I mean, yeah, and I'm more excited about that in some ways. But this next book, the one I'm working on now, I've added about 12 or 15 new characters in addition to the ones you've met before. And then the
Mhm.
summer book and the fall books are going to be adding more and more characters. So and the whole reason I'm doing this was some feedback on the first one, like, where's Abby's friends? I'm like, oh yeah, I guess she would have friends. Um, and more about, like, I need more people to kill. Like, I need
Mhm.
like 100 people to slaughter in this book, so
Well,
um and that's really why I am peopling the cozy mystery with characters now that I hope by the end of book 4 everyone comes to love, is so that I can just kill them.
just kill them all.
Yes, exactly. And the most like horrible ways, like, yo,
That's. I mean that's the best thing I've heard in a long time.
yeah.
I can't imagine you're doing that. I think it's wonderful.
Oh, it's going to be great, and it's going to be really cathartic, and I think,
Oh
uh
yeah.
and it's not that I don't love these characters. I really do.
Hmm.
But it's purely as a creative exercise. It
Hmm.
is, I know it's manipulative, but that's what writers do. I mean, we manipulate emotions, but
Absolutely.
it's like, oh yeah, I want to write the book that I've never had the courage or never read. I mean, the closest thing I can think of it as far as feeling. Have you seen the movie version of The Mist, Stephen King's The Mist?
I have, yes.
Okay, the ending of that movie was not the original
Hmm.
ending of the novella or the short story. They changed it, which I think was a superior ending. And it's sucks the breath out of you. You're like, oh my god.
So it's
There,
different. Oh,
there,
I didn't know that.
yes. I mean, so it is so bleak and dark. I'm like, oh, and as
Hmm.
a writer, I'm like, I was jealous. I'm like envious. Like, man, I wish I would
Yeah.
have written that. As a
Hmm.
consumer, as a viewer, I was like, I can't believe you did this. And that's how I want the fifth book. I want that to feel like
Hmm.
every time someone dies, like, how, I want that, like, oh my
I think
god.
I love that idea, Mark. I think that's incredible because
Oh
I know that I had moments, and I'd said this many times when I was writing book one of Season to Kill, and I thought, I just want to get a dose of anthrax or something, just wipe this town out. I've done, I've had it up to here, or I'm going to bring in 3 serial killers and just kill everyone. So I had moments when I was struggling with it. But I think your idea of like taking the town and just wiping them out and a gore fest is just wonderful. I
yeah.
can't wait to read
I
it.
mean, it's like people are going to show up, and it's going to be like people who first showed up at Roanoke 10 years or a year after, like,
Exactly.
where the hell's everybody? Like, like, well, oh my god.
I
you
know.
know
And then you'll have all your fans that have read your Cozy Mysteries will just be saying you hate mail.
I know.
You'll just
I'm
get a
hoping,
barrage of hate mail.
how dare you slaughter these people? I'm like, you read the book. You could have stopped at the
Absolutely.
first one. I mean, the first scene of gore in this book that,
Mhm.
you know, I'll tell you how the beginning of the book goes, if that's okay, if you
Oh,
don't
good.
mind. Okay.
Oh, please do.
Ray Acavito's been gone for a week or
Mhm.
so, like at police training or doing something for the police. And he's coming into town, just getting back into town, and stops in. And as he's getting ready to come in, he's got a radio call, hey, I'm back home.
Mhm.
Oh, Ray, there's a call. Can you go out and check on this family? I won't say the name because I don't want to spoil it, but just say
Okay.
there's some people you're going to meet in this spring book who aren't going to make it
Mhm.
to the fifth. They're not going to make it to the fifth. Just tell. Anyway, so he goes out to their house, and it's this extended family, and he goes in the kitchen and finds them all dead with like shotgun blasts, like murder suicide, like everyone's heads have been blown off.
Okay.
And it's just the whole kitchen smells of rotting flesh, and there's blood.
Oh.
It's like a slaughterhouse, carnal, And he's like, "Oh my god, fuck this! It's just like the worst thing you've ever seen. Like, who could have done this to this family?"
Mm-hmm.
And
How
then
many victims is there, Mark, in the kitchen? So how many victims in the?
well, there's mom and a dad and a bunch of kids. Like,
Oh my
there's like
God.
probably
Wow.
five kids. All the way down from like 3 and 4 years old, like tiny.
Oh my goodness.
Well, you'll
Okay.
find,
So a
um,
right sick
well,
son of a bitch.
forensics will find that they wasn't just like a murder. No one came in and slaughtered them. They took turns taking their own lives with the shotgun, because they'll all have burn marks, powder marks, or gun mark, from the gun. Their
Of
prints are going to be
course.
all over the gun, and except for the children, and those children were killed, but the tiniest ones. And it's like, what the fuck, like, oh, okay, how in the world does
Wow.
this
Okay.
does this family all sit around and watch each other blow each other's heads off, and have to reload and take turns and watch as we kill each ourselves?
Okay. So we're getting down and dirty
And
into
so
some dark psychology.
there you have the beginning of
Oh my
the
lord.
fifth book. And that let's say that's the bright spot. Okay.
That's the happiest part of the book.
Well, let's just starts with a bang. Let's just say
Okay.
that.
Literally.
So
Oh, that's
there.
wonderful. I'm so excited for this.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for indulging me in that. Because
Oh, that was my pleasure. I can't wait.
only a only a few people. Well, now we'll see if I keep this in.
Was it?
Yeah, but that's how the book's going to begin, and you're going to know very quickly that if you bought this book expecting a cozy mystery, and if the cover itself didn't tell you, because it's going to be white with the word juniper in black, and it's going to look like my other cozy,
Mhm.
cover with the little town in it. It's going to have the little town, except it's just going to be a different font. And I have the town, but it's going to be a
Okay.
black outline, and then the town is just going to be dripping blood, like red
Oh, I
streaks.
love that.
Real simple, black, white, and red. Simple, stark,
Love it.
you know.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I thought, okay, if that doesn't tell you enough that this is not a cozy mystery, hopefully the first mass suicide murderer will do the trick.
We'll do the trick. I mean,
Yeah. So fingers crossed, you know.
oh, I love
Um,
that.
so, but anyway, well, let's talk about these characters, because that's really what makes our stories what it is. I mean, you can have wonderful prose, but you have to have characters who push that story and we learn about the people through what they say and what they do and what they think.
Mhm.
So how do you create and develop your characters?
It's funny. So my debut book is A Season to Kill, and when I started to write that, before I started to write that, the characters were in my head first. So for me, um, I know a lot of writers maybe do it a different way, but for me, it was character driven all along. So I had my main character and I had my killer. I could see, I knew who my main character was. She was kind of tucked away in my head for a while, I think, Mark. But then I saw my killer, and then I thought, okay, so what makes this person tick? What is driving them forward to commit these acts that they're about to do in the book? Why? What traits might they have? How are they going to get away with it, or try to get away with it? So all these things were in my head first. So that's how I get to know my character. And in the case of A Season to Kill, I'm quite interested in psychology. So I knew that the killer had a narcissistic personality. So I did some research into that. And that takes you down a rabbit hole, doesn't it? When you start to research psychological conditions and stuff like that, oh my goodness, it scares the life out of you. So I spent a lot of time researching all these different traits. And that's what, so I had the main character, the killer, and then I started to fill in who the other characters were going to be, the people that I wanted to stay throughout the whole series, and the people who would fill in the plot holes and the red herrings and the suspects, if you will, because it is a whodunit. So that's how I approached creating my characters for A Season to Kill, and I'm doing it exactly the same way for book 2, which is called A Deadly Shade of Winter, which takes place 6 weeks after the first book finishes. So for me, it's get to know my character, or what I'm trying to achieve with this person. And sometimes I do a little research. If it's a killer, I'll do a little research into, what kind of traits they might have, what kind of things might give them away, and what makes them tick, I think. Because we all have those little traits or idiosyncrasies that I like to write in. I think
what makes real people real.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, yeah. So my main character, she's got a lot of quirks and traits, and I felt that was important to write her that way, because we're all like that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Do you bring a lot of yourself into your character, the main character?
I did, Mark. I wasn't sure that I intentionally did that, but when I read the very first draft back, I thought, oh my goodness, so much of myself had leaked onto the page that it was quite startling. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, especially if it's not intentional. If it's just kind of coming out subconsciously, yes, I can see that would be like, oh,
subconsciously. And I
maybe I could start killing people too. No,
I thought, excellent, Dexter.
Yes, I'll start solving murders. I'll make a TV show for me.
Fabulous.
Right.
Phone Ted Levine.
I would watch, exactly. Yes, you and Ted Levine out there solving murders in Glasgow. That would be awesome.
Fabulous.
Yes, Glasgow PI. I would pay $1 to see that.
Yes. We have to get Ted's agent on the phone tonight.
Yes, I'll reach out. That would be awesome. Yes. That would be great.
So now we've created a TV show as well, but so that's how I approach things with the characters, really, Mark. It's just to try and make them as well rounded and as believable as possible. But my main character was important for me to get her right, because I don't know about you, but as a female, I've read so many books. With the female character is almost like so perfect that you finish the book and think, oh, I'm such a failure at everything. It's like
right.
These women that can
yes.
run hospitals and be on the cover of Vogue and have 10 children and everybody's perfect.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm a hot mess, literally. I try my best. I was like, I can't create a female character that's just this perfect human being. She's got to have insecurities and flaws and worries, just like we all do.
Right.
So that was my intention when I created Darcy. But she's dragging some emotional baggage along with her as well, that she thinks that she's put to bed, but when she discovers the first body in the book, it quickly becomes apparent that these issues haven't been put to bed at all, really. And I think she was kidding herself on. So she has a lot of inner turmoil going on that comes back to her that she wasn't fully expecting to be dealing with. So poor Darcy's immediately having quite a time of it fairly quickly into the book.
Yeah. That's no, I love it. That's fantastic, because then making your characters flawed or have these problems gives you as a writer the ability to kind of, it almost becomes your therapy and your cathartic process as a writer. To You could talk about these issues and you're going to bring some of your own baggage or unresolved issues or frustrations
Mhm.
to the page, and it's almost like becomes autotherapy in a way.
Oh, definitely. I've said that to many people. I felt very cathartic, and I do when I write. I know some, if you're not having a good day with your writing, it can get very stressful. But if it's going well, it's so cathartic, and it just
Hmm.
lets all that
Yeah,
creativity out. It's fabulous. It's definitely my happy place for sure.
yeah.
Um,
And your
but
characters has that, and your formula genre has that, where if she is having this inner dialogue and she's kind of noodling through the who done it, it also allows her to, if she's confronting it, if these things are like a catalyst for her to react emotionally to, that just gives you
yes,
ample opportunity for you to have run away with inner dialogue like mad.
absolutely. So, and the book is written in first person narrative, which just for me is my favorite way to write. And so I purposely did that. I gave a lot of her inner dialogue throughout the book, um, to get even more inside her head a little bit. So if someone else is talking, you can feel her reaction or her eye. She's quite sarcastic, or her eye rolls in places. And I enjoyed doing that because it allowed me to be inside her head a little more and give the reader a little more view of her feelings and her emotional reactions to a certain situation. um so I really enjoyed writing her a lot. It was a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying bringing her back for the second book, which I don't know, Mark. It's funny. When I started to write A Deadly Shade of Winter, which was only very recently I've started book two, it just immediately is darker than the first book. Um, and I'm not sure if I think my intention is to show that Darcy's grown a little. She's not more jaded, but she's certainly much more wary now than she was in the first book. And she's a little bit tougher than she was in the first book. So I just tried to show that slight evolution of everything that she's been through. Um, because sometimes you read a book, and if people are finding bodies and stuff, and then they're fine 5 minutes later, and I kind of thought, well, how would I react in that situation? Well, I would be horrified and I wouldn't sleep, and you'd be having flashbacks and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think
nightmares.
so. Nightmares, exactly. Of being in like a proper true crime documentary, only you're in it. So I try to bring a lot of that into kind of her visceral reaction to seeing blood spray and trajectory from a bat being raised, for example, and seeing the damage of a body that's left thereafter. And it isn't particularly graphic, my book. The first one isn't anyway. The second one's slightly more. Um, it was more the emotion and the psychology behind the aftermath of finding, of being in these situations, that I found interesting to write. Um, but having said that, I have definitely made the little one a little darker in the second one, and that I find that quite exciting now as a writer, particularly one that does love horror films. So it's can I feel that it just seems a natural progression for it to be a slightly darker. I would even say mystery, but just a darker murder almost immediately right away than the first book. So it's been a progression for me too as a writer,
Hmm.
which I'm thoroughly enjoying.
Yeah, did you I'm jumping the gun a little bit here because this kind of happens to me in this as I started the second book as well. Did you feel a little bit more confident going into it, like as
Mhm.
far as your prose and control
Yeah,
of storytelling?
I
Like,
did. I definitely did. I did have a 2 minute wobble, and I will be honest. I sat down and I thought, can I do this again? If I get another book in me, and I knew I
mhm.
did, but I did have that initial. kind of
Right.
moment of, oh my God, I'm
Yes.
going back in to do this again. What am I thinking?
Exactly.
This
One
is
was enough.
madness.
You skated away with that
Uh-huh.
one. Don't push your luck,
Exactly.
sister.
Don't push my luck. And I don't have enough tequila left in the house to even start trying to write this. But once I get into it, I go over that initial, you know, real wobble that I had for a minute. That self-doubt came to me and it really hunted me down for a moment. But once I got over that, I did feel the confidence come, and I just felt so much more comfortable um, with the characters, that the ones that were remaining from book one, and also what I was trying to achieve, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes,
yeah,
it
I
does.
completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely do have a bit more confidence this time round.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, and then you're coming back into that world again. After
Yeah,
the fact. How much time between book one and one two?
there's only 6 weeks between them, Mark.
Okay, so that's a
So
that's a pretty
yeah,
condensed time. So,
yeah.
right, yeah,
So she's still emotionally dealing with the first
sure. Well, that's a great vehicle that you can continue those
nightmare.
themes.
Yeah,
And it
and
makes the character plausible. But
yeah,
then allows you to see those little small steps of progress that
yeah.
you were talking about.
Hmm.
Yeah, I with obviously since I'm doing seasonal, there's about 3 months difference, and so I kind of get that. So December to January, and
Hmm.
now we're in April, um, so there's only been a few months, but you still have to show progress between the
Yes,
characters because of
yeah.
all the things that happened in the first book. These characters who were touched by this kind of mystery, you want to know how they have progressed in those 3 months. How has this changed them, and how are you
Hmm.
going to show that change? And then Abby herself is on a continuing story arc that with her development, and I'm very obviously and directly using Maslow's hierarchy of needs here as a device to show her from her base needs of survival and food, and
Hmm.
as those are met, as we see like at the end of book one, then she has to move up to the more murkier like
Hmm.
relationships and love and connection to others, and that kind of middle ground is kind of awkward. It causes all kinds of awkwardness because what is my place? Who are these
Yeah.
people, and how do I relate to them? It's like going through adolescence all over again, and it's like, oh, my hair's out of place. Oh no.
I know.
Um,
I'm still in that phase, I think.
yes, and so it. I wanted that for Abby in this one. Like she's just out of her head, like with like all kinds of kookiness because of these things, and I wanted to show that pretty intently. Whereas everyone, other people who've been affected in the first book are genuinely progressing. The catharsis is there. They're moving into a good place. And she is too in the long arc, because eventually, hopefully, by book four, she'll have achieved that self-actualization, and, she'll be happy. Um,
Hmm.
we'll see. I don't know what the fourth book's going to be yet. you know, um,
I love that. That makes perfect sense to me, Mark, and I think we actually have very similar ideas going on, because I'm doing the seasonal transitions too. I have there's only 6 weeks between, because my first book takes place it's just before Halloween, because I'm obsessed with Michael Myers and Halloween. So I had to make the first book because you guys obviously call it fall, but autumn just has such a beautiful atmosphere to it. And one thing that I love to write, which I personally love autumn, it's my favourite time of year. And it's Darcy's favourite time of year in the book. But of course, I particularly wrote this last piece that it's forever tainted her love of the season, because she will forever link um, the the leaves turning to gold and the bronzes and the scarlets with this horrific thing she's been through. So she's quite angry by that at the end, that she doesn't want to correlate her favourite time of year with this horrible chain of events that have occurred, but she feels that they will forever be connected. So that's how I left book one. And then it takes place 6 weeks later, just going into December. And then I'm going to leave a bigger gap of time, and I'm debating whether to make the next one spring. And I have cruel summer planned. The spring one, I'm not too sure whether to skip spring and then just go straight to summer, or whether to do a spring one and then cruel summer will be the fourth one.
We
But
should bundle our
I'll
books
see how
together
it
as the
goes.
holiday packs. You know that now,
The
right?
holiday banana.
We have to. And there's just no, I mean, come on, we got to do a tour together for
How?
crying out loud.
Isn't
Abby's
that
going to come
amazing?
visit
That's so
Glasgow, and
amazing.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, we need to do some book shows together.
that's
That's
so incredible. I
I
that's
didn't
just
know that
amazing
about
me.
you. I mean, I knew you were working on your second book, and I listened to another podcast you did talking about the name and how it was, borrowed, and I thought that was brilliant.
Oh,
From the song, and I thought, well, we get
yeah.
inspiration everywhere. Um,
Mhm.
but the seasonal things, I think that's brilliant.
It's because it's
Yes.
always been a favourite thing of mine. I love the seasons, and I would imagine in the Midwest you'd be the same as here, that you're lucky enough to see the transformation of seasons. So obviously it's not perpetually sunny here; it's
No.
perpetually grey. But we do get the change of seasons, and it's just something that I've always found interesting. So it was just natural for me to build my books around seasons. I've never met anyone else that's done it, so that's fantastic. It's so interesting.
What it is. It's really fascinating. I mean, and as a archetypal kind of story structure. I mean, there is so much already laden into seasons and so much
Yeah.
symbolism and ritual and formula that
Hmm.
it's an easy mine. It's low hanging fruit in some ways, and um,
Hmm.
but trying to change it, you want to put it in there, at least, especially with the genres that we're working with. We have an audience expectation, but like in this book, I mean, I wanted to avoid the obvious Easter symbolism, but there's the whole death and rebirth. You can't avoid that in spring. I mean, that's why
Yeah.
else why I chose spring. You have to go with the seasons. But there's an awful lot of Good Friday in this book, to put it in Christian terms, awful lot of Good Friday
Okay.
before Easter comes. Because that's, I think, shows for me the spring, early spring always is messy because you're seeing the dead remnants of winter. Everything's
That's true.
wet and muddy, and you see broken sticks everywhere, and everything's just like, it hasn't become growing yet. It's all like thawing
Mhm.
out, like, what are you doing? Spring's like, I'm just waking up. And it's an ugly transition before
It
the
is.
flowers come up. And that's,
Mhm.
I liked that. I really wanted to focus on the ugliness of spring.
I love that. I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
very interesting, because the immediate thing that most writers would do is the buds and the blooms and the as you say, the birth of new life.
Hmm.
But I love that idea of actually, well, let's look at the debris that's left over from the winter before.
Yeah.
So
The
that's
snow
super
plows, and
interesting.
yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
The bodies that have been buried underneath.
Exactly. Well, someone murdered this poor bastard in December. He's just thawing out now. My
We've just
God.
found them.
Well, yeah, I can't tell how long he's been dead. He's been frozen for months. Exactly. Right. Well, because it also parallels the characters and the story, and that was why it was an
Mhm.
easy choice. We see things in the beginning where things are kind of at a state of brokenness or death in a way. And so it's easy to kind of set that up. And so to carry, and I have to have a mystery. So there's still a
Mhm.
mystery going on, but there's also this other stories of these people's lives, and trying to run those parallel, like with you're doing your character solving murders, but your character's also going through a world of like trauma. And so
Yeah.
that's what makes, I think, readers really want to invest in themselves and the characters. They care about the characters, they care about the story, and especially when you create a town that feels real, and people feel like if they come from a small town, they're going to identify like, oh, that was kind of like my experience, or that reminds me of
Mhm.
this. And that's a wonderful feeling to have. I mean, maybe not all the murders, but to be saying, yeah, this reminds me of the place I lived. That's kind of a wonderful thing to hear from
Uh-huh.
people.
That's I love that, Mark, and looking at it from a reader's point of view, I love nothing better than there's many authors that I love that have written a series of books, and for me, it's like visiting old friends. I get a kick out of that. I really do. I love to go back to the same town and catch up in the next book with what's happening. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
A lot of people, I think, love standalones, and I'd love to write a couple of standalones one day if I am ever graced with time. Um, but I do like that idea of someone out there would like feel emotionally invested enough to say, "Oh, I can't wait to read the second book in that and see what's happening in the town and these people and how they're progressing through their life." It's like an emotional investment of somebody's time, and if you can get a reader to do that, I think it's the biggest compliment. Um, because I know that's what I do with other authors' books. I'm like, "Oh, I can't wait! It's coming out next week." We kind of get excited to go back into the story again.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's great too. It's very exciting. And when people who've read your first book, when they know you're writing another one and the same characters, and they start telling you or encouraging you, like, "Oh, I can't wait to read it." That's a feeling I never really thought I would really hear.
It
Like,
must be amazing.
well, I mean, it's just weird. It's wonderful. Um, and I'm delighted that to have experienced that, and people are encouraging. Um, it makes me want to write well for them. Like, I want them
Yeah.
to enjoy the book. I mean, hopefully at the end of the day, I don't know. I think every writer's going to say, I don't know what the reader is going to like. And the few things I do take from Stephen King from his writing is, you got to write for yourself. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter audience expectations, your editor, your publisher, or that's in our case, ourselves. I have to be
Hmm.
happy at the end of the day. I've got to be happy with what I've written.
Hmm.
And then I just kind of let it go and hope that it resonates with people.
Yeah. I
Um,
absolutely agree there, 100%.
yeah. I mean, you want that. You want people to like it, obviously, because you want them to buy it and enjoy it. But I don't see myself as someone who's going to write for market and just try to crank out some kind of shit for people to consume.
For
Like
people to
another
buy
30,
up. Yeah.
yeah, another 30 Shades of Grey, or for Christ's sake, we don't need, no one needs that.
Nobody,
Um,
nobody ever needed it.
yeah, but if I was going to write to market, I would probably write something like that. I would create a different name, so I was writing with a female name, and then I would write that, because that seemed like,
Yeah.
um because if
I'd be the worst.
yeah, because if Mark Justice writes 51 Shades of Grey, oh, how dare you, it's for misogynistic. But that's a weird thing. Women can write erotica in a way that's, I guess it's more accepted. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a whole unpacking of gender roles and things that we don't need to get into. But yeah, I
It's
have.
true though. It's very true.
Yeah, it is. So that's
Hmm.
why, like, it never appealed to me as a genre. It's like, I'm not going to consume it. I don't want to write it. I just want to write what makes me happy, and
Hmm.
what I'm excited to write, and the things that I want to bring, whether it's the
Yeah, me
cozy
too.
mystery or a splattered western or a horror pulp. I just want to tell fun stories that, like, make me happy.
Hmm.
If I can get a visceral emotional reaction from people, all the better. you know
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah
That
I
100%.
yeah I did have some of that in my second book, Gage Black, Hell's Revenge, because it's a splatter western, so it's very violent, but it's also dealing with the being lied about and being framed for a crime you didn't commit, and this concept of revenge and how sweet revenge can be, and what it takes and the things that happen to make a person lose his humanity, and that's kind of what I
Well,
loved
that's
about
it. That's interesting. That's very interesting.
it. And that's what the story I wanted to tell. I mean, I love revenge. I don't believe in the biblical adage, let God have his revenge. I'm like, God, no, I
No.
want revenge. No, this is my dish. I want to taste it. And
Serve
so
it cold
yes, or hot,
or hot.
yes, all of it's good. And so that's what I really like. And there were times when I wrote Gage, where I was like, oh fuck, Mark, boy, you are really, did you know you could do this? I'm like, I don't know, but I like it. I'm just gonna keep on going with it. All right, just so this dialogue with myself. I'm like, yeah, no, this is exactly what I want. Yeah, this guy is gonna, he's been pushed to the
That's
edge.
fabulous.
He's a monster now. So there's nothing he won't do, nothing off bounds. And it was so liberating and freeing
It must have
to
been.
write that. And
Hmm.
honestly, Nick, that was like the first time that I had written something that I felt like, okay, this is my work. This is honestly 100%
Yeah,
down to the very last fuck. This is Mark Justice. This is the kind of stuff that makes me feel like I'm a writer,
I love
Like,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
100% me. And I wasn't worried about audience. I didn't know what a splatter Western was until well after I'd written it. I'm just telling the story of this
Yeah,
revenge, and trying to make it as viscerally unsettling as I can and
it's
disturbing.
possible. Hmm.
Yeah. And so,
I think that's so interesting, Mark. I love that. It's funny you say. The very first book I wrote was in my 20s, and it was a story I called it Sympathy for the Devil. And it was a story of a woman who has spent a lot of time being in a horrendous domestic abuse situation. And her husband is a celebrated professor that everyone is a toast almost of the community. And eventually she snaps one night and she kills him. And this was way before Dexter. So she eventually she gets away with it and then basically hunts perpetrators down. And that was my idea for Sympathy for the Devil. And I just let everything out. That when you're in your 20s and you're feisty and a bit, I can do this. And it was very dark. And I loved every minute of it. But I never did anything with it. And it's still sitting upstairs. And the manuscript's still upstairs, lying under a heap of books somewhere.
where is, come on,
Um,
bring it out. Bring it
It's
out.
funny. A friend of mine
Yes.
was saying that to me the other week. You really should pull that back out again because I never forgot her and I never forgot the story because it was important for me to tell it.
Hmm.
And then I can remember the first time I sat down and watched Dexter, and I was like, well, wait a bloody minute. I
Yeah.
had this idea ages ago.
Yes. This
you
reminds me
know,
of my own
this,
genius. My God.
ah, I'm phoning up Michael C. Hall as well when we're off this podcast. I was outraged. But so maybe one day, Mark, I'd like to take that back out and do something with it
Yes.
because my writing style's completely changed, but I think it would be very liberating to bring her back. Uh, and it was such a good story to tell, and it was important to me to tell it.
Sure.
So I definitely want to
I'll
maybe
read it. I'll
do
be the
that
first
back.
one to read it.
And it'll
I
be super dark, and I'll be all
Yes.
liberated by doing these really gory murders. I'm so excited.
I will want to get a real copy. Like when you get copies of that book, like you get your physical copies, I will want one. I will want it signed because
I will sign it, I
yes,
promise.
thank you. Yeah. Yeah, sign it in red pen so I can tell people it's blood. Um
From my first
no,
victim.
that's right. I love that. And it's funny because so often we look back at the stuff that we did when we were in our 20s or earlier,
Yeah.
because I used to write poetry way back in the day because I was afraid to write fiction.
Mhm.
I wanted to be the next Stephen King. As a teenager, I would have
Mhm.
all these great ideas for horror stories, a lot of them very
Yeah.
derivative of things. But I was afraid to write dialogue because I thought I was afraid to take the chance. And
Mhm.
fear kept me away from that, but
Mhm.
steered me into poetry, shorter form. But and looking back, even though I felt like poetry was never my thing, I learned a lot about writing and the condensed use of language and imagery that has shown up. It makes its appearances in my fiction, like my use
Yeah.
of language and imagery, because I'm a visual writer. I when I'm thinking of something, it's like a movie being played out in my head when I'm thinking of a
Yes.
scene, and I'm just trying my best to convey what it is that I'm seeing and hearing.
Mhm.
And I think writing poetry for all those years And then writing movie scripts. That's when I realized, oh, I can tell a story using dialogue. I mean, my scripts are nothing but dialogue, and I tell a whole story. So, that was like, oh, well, I might as well just write long fiction. I got nothing to lose, because it just you have to take that chance. But if I look back at my stuff that I wrote probably way back then, I would probably cringe, which is why I got rid of it all. It's like, I don't want. Except for my BFA thesis, when I got my BFA in creative writing, I don't have like anything,
That's wonderful.
but I want to read that story. I want to read this revenge, and I'd love that. It's
I,
the
I'd
oldest
love to go
story in the
into it. I'm
world, right?
definitely going to. It is absolutely. And the reason I called it "Sympathy for the Devil" was, well, I love it again. See, I have a thing with stealing my titles from songs, so I love the song anyway. But it was this idea that although she's committing these heinous acts, you must sympathise with her,
Mm-hmm.
because every one of these people she's taken out is a monster
Yes.
and shouldn't be breathing air anyway. Um, and so it's that moral dilemma,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. And I had sympathy for her. I could
Sure.
understand her. So
Yes.
I loved it. But again, I only been in my 20s. I didn't know anything about the publishing industry, and the self-doubt kicked in, and then life took over, and it just got put away
Right.
and forgotten about for so many years until I started to write again.
And now we have
Um,
KDP, and we don't have to worry about publishers.
and now,
We have a trusted group of people
absolutely,
who can edit it and who can serve as our feedback and beta readers. We can design
uh-huh.
covers on Canva. I mean,
It's quite
it
incredible,
is. It's
isn't it? It
amazing.
truly is. It is
Yes,
amazing.
it is. It's
Um,
amazing. Publishing houses
so
are they're not necessary anymore.
they really aren't. It's just a horrible um, thing that you put yourself through the cycle of. And to be honest, Mark, it was the only reason that I had to start writing again emotionally for myself. But that knowledge that I could do something with it this time is what really made a difference for me.
Mm-hmm.
That I knew that I could self-publish in the end once I'd did all the things that you've got to do, the beta readers and the get an editor and all these things. So I'm just at that stage just now of getting my cover sorted for book one, and then I'll have it out this year. So I'm super excited about getting the cover together. I have it in my head what I want. I don't know whether that will translate onto the page. Let's hope so. And crack on with book two. And recently, talking about Sympathy for the Devil, it definitely has stirred those feelings for me to resurrect the book and dig it out from the back of the cupboard.
Yeah. Well, you need to, and you're gonna
I
have.
think so.
We're gonna find an American audience is gonna like it, because the idea of you know finding or enacting justice, um, in the absence of you know using violence to achieve justice is a part of American bedrock belief. As my
Yeah.
and my popular culture is kicking in. Every culture has what's called a bedrock of beliefs. There's a cultural mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the things that America really has going for it. We love the idea of someone using violence outside of the law to achieve justice, and we
Justice.
show it in characters like Batman,
Yeah.
Dirty Harry, with Clint Eastwood. You know,
Loved her.
yes, these are characters who
They're all
step
my
out.
favorite
Yeah,
characters.
John Wick. I mean, these are characters
Yeah.
who, and that's so. This is something that's like when you started talking about, I'm like, yeah, it's just hitting these flags, like ding, 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 ding. For me, like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, yes, it's appealing. That sense of
Uh-huh.
the law is not going to give me justice, and that I'm going to take it out on my own, and it becomes a cosmic
Yeah.
sense in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because I find the devil very sympathetic. I mean, I think he can't do anything on his own. I don't believe the biblical account of the devil. I'm very sympathetic toward him. Um, so I think he's just been a maligned character, very much like,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, just like Prometheus, bringing the fire,
Mm-hmm.
bringing technology. And he's just that character who gets like, wait a minute, the gods are just mad because I helped these poor monkeys evolve. And, and then he's like, you're going to be paying for that. And that's the same thing that the snake does in the garden. Hey, we're going to here, eat this magic apple and you're going to know shit, you know.
Okay.
Right, exactly. You know, but yes, I am so excited about this story, Nick. I really, I can't
Oh,
wait for you to
thank you
dust
so
it off.
much.
If
Thank
you
you.
want a beta reader sometime, like when you get to the point where you're able to
Oh
share
yeah.
it, I would love to be one of your beta readers.
Would you really? Oh,
Oh
thank you
yeah,
so much. Oh, thank
yes,
you.
I'd be
Thank
happy
you.
to.
That's a deal. Thank you so much.
Excellent, wonderful. Oh, I'm so excited now. Um, what let's talk a little bit about your creative process, like when you're
Mhm.
plotting things. How's your creative process? Or if you want to talk about plot and organization, are you a pantser? Are you a plotter? Those kinds of things.
I hate to say it, Mark. I have to admit I'm probably a pantser over a plotter,
I
which is
still like you.
completely.
I still like you. It's
I,
okay.
I do. The funny thing is in my day-to-day life, um, for my job with my children, I am completely so organized. It's frightening. Like, I'm clinical. I'm OCD. Everything runs like clockwork. But when I sit down to write, I tend to open up the laptop, and I never think about word count. I never think about, I want to write 2,000 words today. I have a scene in my head, and that's where I am. I want to get the emotional pull. I want to feel what the characters are feeling. And I don't think about, well, this has to be this length, or I can only write another 500 words here. I just tend to write. So I have it all in my head first, don't get me wrong. My character, my killer always has to, I have to know the killer inside and out. That's a huge part of my creative process. Because I think when you're writing mystery, if you don't understand your killer, what are you doing? For me personally, so I have to know who they are. I have to know why this is happening, whether it's revenge, lust, greed, whatever the um, thing may be, and also what makes them tick. So my first killer, as I said, was a narcissist, very malignant. The second killer is more, it's a obsessive nature that they suffer from. So I did a bit of research into that, which leads from love very quickly turning to hate. That thin line, which intrigued me for the second book. So research into the psychology of the killer, what they're doing, why they're doing it, who they are, and then I tend to come up with my minor characters, and then I just write. So, and it's when I go back round second time to start editing that I'll start to sculpt it and think, okay, that chapter's far too long, the prologue's too long, or all the technical things that really I should have thought about the first time, but I didn't.
Right. Well,
So
a draft can be that. I mean, you have to get something on the page. You can always go back and
yeah,
change it or fix it. It's just
yeah.
getting it out,
I
at
definitely do
first.
some word vomiting. It's not a nice phrase, but I definitely tend to just kind of go with it. And
Yeah.
then when, or certainly that's how I did it for Season to Kill. And definitely Shira Winter is pretty much turning out the same process for me.
Right.
I should have learned from the first one, but it just seems to be how my brain works, Mark. As I say, I'm very clinical, and most things I do, I'm super organized. But when I'm writing, it's a slightly different process for me, which is quite interesting. And I find that quite liberating, actually. I can just sit down and just go with the flow a little. It seems to work for me, I hope. We'll
Sure.
see.
Well, no, that makes perfect sense.
We'll see if I get any reviews.
Yeah. Well, it's a little different with me, but it makes perfect sense for you in that because everything else is so organized. So you have to have some way of just like going, you know,
Yeah,
and that's like,
exactly.
but you've done the work beforehand, which I find fascinating. And that's I wanted to, that's I'm glad that you mentioned research because I hadn't really talked with other writers who had done research, and it makes perfect sense that because you're working with people who have real issues, you want to make sure you're treating it with
Yeah.
with concern and care and accuracy, and
Hmm.
you're not just trying to mislabel someone. You want to make sure, and the details, the good is in the details. um, and I like I didn't do any research for the cozy other than know what a cozy mystery was, but for Gage Black, it takes place in 1876 to 1880 or so, or no, 1860
That
to 1869. It's right after the Civil War, and so
was
I had
that
to.
quite difficult to write, Mark? Sorry to interrupt, because I'm quite intrigued by what it must be like to write something in a different time period. Was that
Um,
quite difficult to do?
no, not really. I mean,
Wow.
I just did because the story is and the story and the character and the plot are the same. I mean, I knew the basic shell of the plot. As I'm an outliner, I'm an organizer. My outline was only like 6 pages, but it's a pulp, so it's not very long. Like
Hmm.
60,000 words or something. Um, but what I wanted to do to make it grounded in post Civil Wars, the research I did was what kind of weapons were used. I had looked at mail routes throughout the West because he's a Union soldier. He's from Ohio. I actually looked for Union regiments in Ohio. I even found a little spot like east of Columbus, our state capital,
Hmm.
where even now it's unincorporated. It's not really folded into. It's kind of existing in its own little pocket, with sand without like a organizing governmental body. And I thought that's where he comes from because he's a farmer by trade. It's become Union soldier, and then I did some research into prisons, and then Arizona, which I learned was kind of part of the
Fascinating.
conspiracy, and so I kind of did all this stuff and kind of have an idea where do I want this
Hmm.
prison, and then really just like I wanted to make sure the weapons were accurate and the kinds of like I said, the mail route, because that was an
Yeah.
important element of the story, and so I had maps and things like that. So I just did a background research. The end of the Civil War, what was Arizona like, what was Ohio like, weapons, but it was to be able to talk about and add those details in the story,
Yeah.
give it that air of authenticity without
Hmm.
coming across as being like a research paper or something like
Of
that.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
this So the process was just learning this information so that I could write about it without seeming like I'm just dropping in stuff. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I did the same thing with Death's Head because it takes place in the 30s and in and around Haiti. So I did research into the history of Haiti, what was going on with the American relationships with Haiti. It
Fascinating.
was
Hmm.
voodoo. I learned all kinds of things about voodoo, and because I wanted to respect practitioners of voodoo or
Of
voodoo,
course.
I wanted to make
Uh-huh.
sure I knew who these the their the Loa, who their gods were, and what the
Hmm.
personalities were like, because the main character kind of gets possessed by one. Um, Thus
Oh
the
my
Eye of
goodness.
Samedi, yes. And so I had to
Okay.
make sure I knew who this Samedi character is, because he's like the god of
Hmm.
the king of the dead, the god of the dead. And so I looked at how they dressed and how what their personalities were like, because there's hundreds of Loa and they all have different personalities. And so I was trying to be respectful and learned about the drums and the music and the
It's
names for the
fascinating.
drums. So for me, it was I was learning all the kinds of wonderful stuff. And then, part of my process when I wrote the book, I wanted to do it in a month. I gave myself 30 days to write this book. And I have it's on my jukebox right now on my computer. I found like a big 5 hour block of voodoo music. And so I just like listen to that like every day. I'm like listening to voodoo drums and
I
singing
love
and music.
that.
And it
To
was like,
get you right into the
yes, it
zone.
did. I'm like, and I kind of knew.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I'm 45 minutes in. And here's this. Oh, I love this part. And I'm like, I'm feeling this voodoo-y, kind of
Hmm.
scary vibe, and so yeah,
I love that.
that
So
that was
interesting.
part of my process. But yeah, so it's the research, probably like for what you found, the research is essential in that it helps you write with
It
knowledge.
does. Yeah, it helps me, I think, understand a little more of what I'm trying to um of what I'm trying to achieve with a character. And then I like to imagine. I like to see them in my head and think, what do they sound like? How do they look? How do they turn their head? Or, how would they sit down and things, just silly things like that. But for me, it's important to visualize what they would be like if you met them in real life, because that helps them come alive to me as I'm writing them. Um, but like you do, I think sometimes if I maybe was writing an emotional scene, I like to get some music on sometimes as well. I think music comes hand in hand for me sometimes too, to help me get the words out, or just kind of chip into the emotion a little. Um, Try to watch a good movie at the weekend, especially a really good horror. Get some really dark moments going, and and that will help me. All different things can help me in the creative process. But I think definitely for me, it's just understanding my characters a little, knowing who they are, what makes them tick, uh, and knowing my killer for sure is definitely my main thing.
Sure.
Why is this happening?
Right. Well,
I
having that
think
knowledge already in the back of your mind allows you to kind of be free and write because you're venting as you go. And I think it's the part of
exactly. That's a lovely way to put it. That's perfect. I love that. I am venting as I go.
yeah. Well, I mean, even if you, no matter how much you outline something, like my current outline for my current book is like 23 or 27 pages. It's pretty extensive, but that doesn't compare to the 400 pages it's going to be at the end of the day, because you still
Mhm.
have to, line by line, word by word, you still have to create your story and tell your story.
Yeah.
And it's still one step at a time toward this end. You know where you're going. You've got a good map, but it doesn't cover
Mhm.
every moment of the journey. And that's what you have to kind of make up as you go along. So
Yeah.
I find that in the act of writing itself, it has this wonderful place of like preparation, um, invention, and tension and imagination, discovery. All these things kind of hit in a wonderful place, because I'm sure as you experience, as you
Yeah.
write, there are things that happen and characters will do and say things that you really kind of didn't plan on, but
Oh,
you're happy that it happens.
absolutely. That's so true. There was people even that came into Season to Kill that were never there to begin with. But as I was writing it, they came into my head and I knew exactly why they were there and what role they were going to play. And it just flowed so much better for it. And I found that really fascinating because I thought, where did they come from? Because they were never originally intended to be
Hmm.
any part of the book, and why are they there? Why are they on the page? But they were there for such an important reason. Um, and I think that's such a great point, Mark, that it's not until you get into and all of these things collide that these perfect little moments, like creating a new character or them doing something that was never part of your intention, but
Hmm.
it makes the story so much better,
Hmm.
um, flows out, and it's wonderful when that happens.
It is. It doesn't happen
Mhm.
often enough, and
No, it
there are
doesn't.
times, yeah, like when I wrote Death's Head, I felt nothing. There was only one day where I felt like I was doing something good. Like I knew I'm. There were times where I wrote like, okay, that's a good line or something, but I just felt nothing, about the book. Um,
Okay.
but it was weird, it was just a weird feeling. But there were a couple times when I wrote the cozy, that the scene where Abby has dinner with the Akabitos, that scene kind of took on a life of its own. And I was from my cheeks were hurting because I was like smiling and laughing, like I felt like I was there in the dinner. I wasn't like constructing this scene. I just felt like I'm just trying to keep up with exactly what they were going to say. I'm just trying
What's
to write it down as I'm hearing it, and that was
mhm.
when I was done with it. I was so happy with this and like, oh my God, this to me felt like I had a moment where the characters kind of came alive, did their
Mhm.
thing, and I just wrote it down. And that was a remarkable feeling.
That's super. Wouldn't it be beautiful if you could have that from the first word to the last one.
It really would. If you're a horror fan, I don't know. Do you watch American Horror Story on FX
I've
or on
seen
Hulu?
I've seen the first season of American Horror, but I haven't seen much else of it,
Okay. Do you have Hulu?
which is quite surprising. Not in the UK. I don't,
Mm,
Mark. So it's on Hulu, isn't it? I think that's why um, I haven't seen other. Try to think. I think it's on the Fox channel over here,
okay.
perhaps.
Yeah.
But I think we're probably about 4 seasons behind you.
Oh, okay. Well, if you get to the current one, I think it's called Double Feature or something.
Okay.
It's all about. You'll like it because it's about artists and writers and something that happens that allows them to become amazing. I mean, you have to have
Oh,
talent,
okay.
but something that they do that, and then you see this writer who was he's been frustrated. He's working on this book. He's getting a lot of pressure from his agent, and I'll just say something happens, and then he like cranks out these amazing scripts and screenplays like he's a fiend,
Okay.
and he's written like in the course of a few months, he's written like 6 years of work, 6 novels and just all the stuff,
Can
and
I
one,
say no?
I know exactly. And then one character writes like a 400-page book overnight. I'm like, that's what I want.
I know.
Give me the
But if you have to,
pill. I want that,
if you
whose
have to sell
whose
your soul
blood
or
do
chop
I
off a
drink?
few bodies, I know.
Exactly. It's like,
That's
yes,
fine.
it's worth it. Yeah, come here. I'll take it. But you'll like it. I was like, I want this world to be real.
That's
I
it.
I want that. So
Me too.
now your life is pretty crazy, as you mentioned. So do you have a favorite time of day that you like to write?
I prefer to write during the day, but I eventually end up writing at night.
Okay, makes sense. Your life is pretty
um,
crazy. Yeah,
so just with work and the kids, and such, I do get up early before everyone else gets up, and I'll try and get a little, even if it's 45 minutes,
sure.
just to get the
Yeah.
coffee on. I can't function without coffee. I'm such a cliche. I'm a writer's cliche. I mean, honestly, I drink so much caffeine, but get the laptop opened, try and pick up where I left off the day before, and I do my best to get a little bit done. Because I'm a morning person. Believe it or not, I am. I can get straight into the flow in the morning.
Yeah.
And then I go and get everyone up and get the kids ready for school, etc. I'm still working from home just now, which has been wonderful,
Sure.
because of COVID. And I would love to continue to work from home, because now at lunchtime, instead of doing something completely pointless, I'm sitting down to write, and it's wonderful. So I
Hmm.
should be saying that in case anybody from work's watching.
Yeah. No, I get
But,
it. Yeah.
but it's been fabulous for me as a writer. And so I get a wee bit hopefully done during the day. And if I don't, I'm kind of trying to percolate on what I did in the morning and let it simmer and think, right, what do I want to achieve tonight? And if I get the chance, I get the dinner and homework and all the stuff done. And then at the end of the day, I get to sit down finally and write. And sometimes I admit I'm a little tired, and I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
maybe just want to chill out and watch a movie, but it has to be done. And so that I think that's my biggest struggle with writing is time, Mark. And it's probably what most people struggle with, I think, but it's time for me. If I had more time, I'd like to think I'd certainly be able to write an awful lot faster
Yeah.
than what I'm doing at the moment.
It's hard when your time is divided by taking care of other people and other things that you have to
Yeah,
do and work and those kinds of things. I
I
envy
know.
the people who they write full time or they can write full time.
Oh, it
And
must be
yeah,
wonderful.
I remember reading an article. It was on a writers group that I belong to on Facebook. It said how 10 tips to write full time, begin writing full time. I'm like, well, let's just see what this person says. And the very first thing this person says is, well, my husband works at a really good job, so I don't have to. I'm like, well, then I stopped reading. I'm like, because that that's it then. You
That's
don't
it.
have kids,
That's
your
it.
husband's making the cash, you can afford to write all day. Well, that's 90% of it, you know? You don't have to have
Exactly.
15 things done today. And you're tired by the end of the day. It's like, you know what? I want to write, but God damn it, I'm just really tired. you know?
And just
Yeah, exactly.
I want to have a stiff drink and forget this day ever happened. It's usually
Yeah. It's like I'm playing the lottery. Like, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I won
um,
$100 million. I'm gonna write, right.
yeah. I mean, I would have stopped reading the article too because if I had the luxury of being able to write all day, I'd like to think that my second book would be done and edited. My first book would be published, and I'd be well into my, the serial killer book would have been resurrected.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah,
You'd be on your
so
10th, you'd be on your
unfortunately,
10th or 12th
I
book.
put my 10th.
Yeah.
Ted Levine would be here.
That's right. That's right. Oh, wait. Here's your 10th book or 11th book. Yes, exactly. Right. Going down to Glasgow. Gonna solve a murder. Exactly.
So
Well, that's a fantastic goal. If I win the lottery, I'll try to make that happen. I'm sure,
please do.
I'm sure Chet Levine
Call
has a
me.
rate. Yeah. Oh,
So,
$100,000 a week. All right, there we go. If nothing
oh,
else, just
that's so
walking
funny.
around the town pretending to solve murders might be fun.
Oh,
Go down to
I'd
the
love to
pub
do
and have a
that.
few pints. That would be awesome. So, um,
Every time I go away for the weekend to, like, if we go to the Highlands in Scotland for like a cabin retreat, I'm like, can I just find a body? Can I solve the crime? It never happens.
mhm, right. Yeah. If I could, there's no highlands here in Ohio. Well, we do have we're at the beginning of the Appalachian Mountains, so I guess I could take you south to show you some highlands
Oh, of
down
course.
in Amish country, and get you some good Amish cheese.
And
So
butter.
yeah. Um, we're kind of winding up here. It's just a few more questions. Like what would be like your goals or ambitions, your ultimate writer fantasy? Like when you imagine, like, okay, we kind of just talked about with you if you had won the lottery, but realistically, what do you think your ultimate ambition or fantasy would be as a writer?
My fantasy would be to write full time, Mark. If I could, not even talking about financial, but if I don't know if I could sell enough books just to even break even enough that I could, stop my job and write full time. That would be my fantasy for sure.
Hmm.
It's probably every writer's fantasy, I think.
Yeah, to make a
If I
living
To make a
writing.
living
Sure.
writing, it doesn't need to be a wonderful living, but if I can make it enough to keep everything ticking over and write, that's exactly what I would do. That would make me happy. And also, if anything that I produce that someone says, you know what, I really enjoyed that. That's all I do. I think for me, getting over my self doubt was realizing that I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm writing mystery. I'm writing domestic noir. It's been done 1,000 times before, and it will be done 1,000 times after. Um, but I'd like to think it's good work. And so if someone reads it and enjoys it, which fingers crossed my beta readers and everyone that's read it so far has enjoyed it, um, then that would make me just extremely happy.
Yeah.
So that's all. If what I write gives people pleasure for a few hours to enjoy,
Hmm.
um, then I would be absolutely thrilled beyond belief. And also, if I could just break even and be able to scrape by and make a living writing full time, then I'd be a very happy writer.
Yeah, I don't know what that feels like. You know,
I
I
don't know
mean,
either.
yeah. So I'm not sure if you have them over there. I before the pandemic came in, I was doing like craft shows where I would sell my books there, and especially around Christmas time, people would love to come and
Oh,
buy books and stuff. And sometimes I did all
I
right.
love
I mean,
that.
like I would sell 10 copies. I thought that was a pretty big day for me to sell 10
That's
copies.
fabulous.
Most days I was lucky to break even. I sold three and covered my table costs, and but. Um, Yeah, do you have opportunities like that? Do you have like book fairs or places where an author can go and, is there like an indie arts or artist scene in near Glasgow?
there's there is a there's quite a big art scene in Glasgow, with writers and poets and artists, musicians. But the funny thing is, Mark, I haven't been in that area since really I was in university. Um, and since I get back into writing, once the kids are a little older now, I've been so long out of that, environment sort of thing, that I'm not even sure where I would begin. So there's definitely a community there in Glasgow, because Glasgow is quite an artistic city, believe it or not. But I just haven't. I wouldn't know where right now to jump into it, if you will. So I have to do my bit of favourite research to see kind of what's going on. But we don't have so much of what you guys have, so much as like craft fairs and things like that, which I love. But we don't seem to have a huge amount of them, or certainly not in Glasgow anyway. Um, but if we did, then it would be certainly fun to go along and try to sell some books and stuff like that. That would be good fun. But it's definitely an artistic city, so I just have to start to look into where the opportunities might lie to see if there's a market to sell my book in it.
Yeah, or do a
But
reading
otherwise,
somewhere,
I'm kind of,
perhaps.
or do a reading or something, which would be
Yeah,
wonderful, because you tend to find that a lot of these opportunities do obviously go down to more traditionally published authors,
sure.
I think, rather than us poor indie
Yeah.
authors.
Have you tried your local
So
libraries? I know we have a couple of libraries in the area that showcase indie writers, which I think is fantastic. That they do that.
I think that's fantastic too. So it's one I'm going to have a look into when I get my cover for A Season to Kill finished, and I have so it's all ready to go. I just have to get the cover for it, Mark. And then that's definitely something I'm going to look into, because I can't imagine. I used to love libraries, and I can't imagine getting into my own book in a library. It would be as exciting as seeing it in a bookshop.
Sure.
Like that must be amazing, you
Yes.
know.
Right.
So it's definitely something that I'll look into for sure.
Good.
I keep my fingers crossed.
Yes, I hope that for you as well. Um,
Thank you.
yeah. Just one of the last couple of questions.
Hmm.
Tell me how you felt seeing your book in print for the first time.
I haven't.
Oh,
I'll
really?
let you know.
Oh, your first one.
No,
Oh,
my
is it?
first one's still. It's still to be. Because it's not out yet, so I haven't.
Oh, I
I've not
thought
got
it
it in my
was.
hand.
Oh, wow.
No, no, it's not. It's not out yet, Mark. It's debuting this year.
Oh, okay.
So
Well, then that answered my
I.
question. What would you like to promote? So we got a new book coming out. I forgive me, Nick. I thought it was
Not
out
at
already,
all.
and the second one was coming out this year.
No, I'm so sorry. No,
No,
so
no,
A
it's
Season to
okay.
Kill is still to debut. Mark, so it's the Season to Kill cover that I'm working on just now. Um, and I can't imagine what that feeling will be like. I think it will be the most surreal. I've dedicated the book to my mum, because my mum got to read the first draft of it, and then my mum passed away,
Oh, I'm sorry.
sadly, and
Yeah.
2 Christmases ago. So she passed on that love of reading to me,
Hmm.
and the love of the mystery, by giving me that very first Agatha Christie book. So the book's dedicated to her, and it's just sad that she's not here to see it in print.
Sure, sure.
But so it means a lot to me, this book, for many different reasons, and that's definitely one of them. So I think I'll be very emotional, very bowled over to like hold it and say, "My God, I
Yeah.
actually did it after years of
Yes.
procrastinating."
It is just a
You
little
know, and
surreal.
talking about it must be. How did you feel, Mark, when you did your very first book?
Um, when I first opened it up, I got like an author proof first, and it was kind of
Uh-huh.
surreal. Like, okay, here it is. And I knew it wasn't like the real one because it said author copy on the front, on a little streamer, so you couldn't resell it or not for resale or something.
Okay.
But it was
Hmm.
still kind of surreal. But like, okay, this is bizarre because I'd only seen it on a computer screen, and it was only then that I um because it was a live. I went live with it, and then I started like reading through my copy, and I started finding typos that I didn't have or didn't see before,
Oh,
and like it went through like 5 different readers, and like these were things that escaped like everybody. I'm like, oh no,
you
and I
do.
felt like an idiot, like and here I was, I was an English teacher at one time. I shouldn't have these kinds of problems in my book. Um, but
But I've seen them in things that have come out from
yeah, it happens,
Simon and Schuster. It happens,
yeah. And so,
It's
right. And I went through and I found a bunch and made copies. And that's the great thing with the KDP. You can upload new books and eventually it got cleaned up.
you
And
can
then,
edit it
yeah,
for yeah.
but it is weird because when you see it in print, you're going to find things that you didn't see on a computer screen. So I think it's important before you do that to get your author proof,
Okay.
read it through, you know, but it is when you finally get it,
Aye.
yeah, read it through, mark it up and say, oh, I found 15 typos. Um, but it is kind of awesome to hold it, and like when you see other people having that book too, or
It must
or
be amazing.
it's weird, or when people ask you to sign it, it's like, I'm nobody, but okay, I'll sign it. They just like it personalized, and I think that's a really kind of a sweet thing to ask. It always feels good to be asked that. So yeah, and I can't wait for you to have that. I'm really happy for you. I want
Oh,
that
thank
for
you
you.
so much. I'm so excited. I can't. I know it'll be a huge emotional moment, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's something that I've wanted for the longest time, for as long as I can remember, to write a book. And as I say, and this one's dedicated to my mum, and so it makes it even that bit more special. So I'm going to be super excited, and I can finally go, oh,
Sure.
have a lie down.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's kind
So
of
excited.
wonderful. Yeah, it's a wonderful feeling. Just don't buy like 100 copies,
I
because
was,
yeah, because you may not sell them all, and then you're sitting on
I
boxes of
was,
books. So I'm, don't make a mark mistake.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
I would.
but well, well, what can you remind the reader or readers, remind us
Mhm.
of the book that is coming out, uh, the one that's coming out first, and also your work in
Mhm.
progress. So your first book is, when is it coming out? What is it called, and when is it coming out?
So it is called A Season to Kill,
Hmm.
and it will be out this year. I'm just saying, I'm just saying 2022,
All right.
just to hopefully sooner rather than later, Mark. The protagonist is Darcy St. Clair. She's a lawyer, a litigation lawyer, um, and she has two small kids. She's married and she lives in Cedarwood in Scotland. And she is dealing with, I've mentioned, some baggage left over from her childhood, which was she was raised in a house with domestic violence, and she had thought that she'd put all these things to bed, all these ghosts to bed, if you will. Um, but she hasn't. They soon come back to her when she's uh, stumbles across the first body of Elle Bradshaw, who's the first victim. It's written in a first person narrative from Darcy's point of view, which was important to me, and I really enjoyed that. She's a feisty character, redhead, but she's very flawed, as I've mentioned before, and she's got lots of little quirks, but she's super kind. She's a great character to write. She's so empathetic to people that she shouldn't even be empathetic to, but she is. But she's a smart cookie, and she quickly realizes that there's an inner circle. The tagline is "Know your inner circle, but look a little closer." And she knows that there's someone who she knows fairly well, possibly intimately, that's behind the three murders in the town. And she realizes fairly quickly that she's put herself in the crosshairs of this sociopath, and it goes on from there. So it's a dark domestic noir. My editor put it in the domestic noir category, Mark, which is like a psychological suspense, if you will. And it's got this beautiful backdrop of autumn in Scotland, and it was a lot of fun to write. I enjoyed writing the book, and I hope that people will enjoy meeting Darcy and going along for the ride. And A Deadly Shade of Winter is book 2, and it takes place 6 weeks after. Darcy's still healing from the emotional fallout from book 1, because obviously there's a huge ending to that book. So she's nursing a lot of physical and emotional wounds, and of course before she knows that she's straight into another situation that involves there's 4 murders in the second book 2, so it's a little darker. And she meets this, funnily enough, she's a young writer of a children's book series, and there's people around her that she's been connected with in her publishing house and from university who are being murdered. So that's what book 2 is about.
So it's bad luck to get to know this girl. So yes,
she's worse than Jessica Fletcher. Like, don't go to Maine, have a cove. You won't survive.
She's gonna start getting a complex. Like, I start showing up and people
she's
start
got
dying.
Enough complexes, the poor soul. I mean, she really wants to move, just pack up and get rid of these people, but no, she stays.
All right.
So it's a domestic noir, psychological thriller, if you will, Mark, and so that's and seasonal as well.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, I love that, and I never heard of the term domestic noir. I think that's fantastic. And will these books be on Amazon and like Kindle?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So and hopefully in paperback, because I've got to have that copy in my hand.
Yes, you need to have a paperback, and Kindle also does hardback copies now too. So if you want to do a special run,
a special one,
right? Yeah, I was in their beta program, and that's how I got a free copy, or not a free, I had to buy it, but my first cozy, I have a hardback of that, and I wasn't overly impressed with the beta thing. It didn't turn out as well as I wanted it to be, but it very well could have just been because of it just needed tweaking. So, but maybe next time around. But it is kind of nice to when you have your books in print. It's kind of an awesome feeling, and I'm so excited for you, and I can't wait for you to see the picture of you on Instagram holding your book, because then I'm like, yes, I want a copy. And to read it.
That's why I've only ever got a mug in my hand.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And for all the naysayers, you're going to sort of put one middle finger up, you're holding your book, you're like, yeah, take that. People said I couldn't do this. Yes, exactly. Right. And there's the picture for there's the snapshot for our episode. Everyone's like,
that could be my author picture.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that would be awesome.
That down, Mark.
Yeah, that's right. Now appearing on FU Books, Nic Winter. Well, Nic, thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, thank you so much.
This has been a lovely time.
It has been so much. I've enjoyed every second, Mark.
Same
here.
Thank you
for having me, and it's just been so nice to connect with you from the very beginning of Instagram, but to even more so to meet you in person.
Exactly. We're about as close as we're gonna get. Right.
As close as we're gonna get, and it's been absolutely wonderful. It's just been a joy. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm going to do my cheesy outro now. So you've been watching and listening to Between the Lines. You can watch us on our YouTube page. That's where you're at right now. And you can listen to us on unsaneradio.com, download full episodes, or listen to on your device. If you're a writer and would like to join me for a chat, email me at betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. That's betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. And here it is, my cheesy outro. See you next time, Between the Lines. There we go. Thank you, Nic. I had so much fun.
That. Oh, I had so much fun, Mark. I can't even tell you. Thank you so much.